And that's been the formula of the left for the last 1,000 years. That's why they're very dangerous people, because they always say that when they do terrible things, they do it for the people, and they care about the people, and they're worried about the people. Sometimes they use the word children. It's for the children. That's what Nancy Pelosi and Hillary Clinton.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Victor Davis Hanson Show. We are recording on Saturday, May 17th. I'm Jack Fowler, the host. This episode will be up on Tuesday, May 20th. Victor Davis Hanson is the Martin and Ely Anderson Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution and the Wayne and Marcia Buskey Distinguished Fellow in History at Hillsdale College. He has a website, The Blade of Perseus. The address is victorhanson.com. Later in this episode, I'll tell you why I believe you should be subscribing. And we have, as ever, Victor, so much to get your take on. I know you want to talk a little more about, we've discussed it on previous episode, the gutter, Qatar, however you want to say it, folks, the $400 million gift plane to Donald Trump. And there have been some anger in MAGA land about this. We have a Supreme Court decision on the deportation of criminals to Venezuela. Jake Tapper's new book. We've talked about that before, but Victor, he's a piñata. You just want to keep hitting till all the pieces of candy come out. Joe Biden's testimony with special counsel Hur has come out, and boy, oh boy, I think he was right when it comes to the idea of prosecuting Joe Biden. DEI living on at Harvard. There's just so much to get to, and we will get to all of that when we come back from these important messages. We are back with the Victor Davis Hanson Show. It's a little late here with 6 at night. Thank you, Victor, for accommodating my life and my schedule in order to do that. I know you've just come back from another road trip, but I don't think you were in an airplane this time, so maybe, am I correct on that? Were you?
Yeah, Jack, I just got back from Hillsdale College. I was there 4 days and gave the graduation address. It went well. I had 5,000 people, and just got home. I drove back from SFO, and then I've got to go. I just went down to Newport for Hoover, drove down 250 miles each way, and now I'm preparing to go to D.C. We have the Bradley Foundation has the Bradley Awards. I'm going to give a lecture at Heritage. So this mid-May was very, very long. A lot of traveling, but I'm getting near the end of it.
Bradley prizes are announced while you're there, or the recipients are. I'm going to be there. I'm going to see you, and I look very much forward to that. So, you have some more thoughts about the infamous $400 million gift airplane to Donald Trump from the government of Qatar.
You know, this whole airplane, the Qatar gift of the $400 million 747 is just replete with disinformation, misinformation, mystery. But from what we can discern or sift through all of the media hysteria is the following. Qatar had two 747s, and they were the latest model of a plane that is no longer in production. They have two that they retrofitted in imperial style. Two of them. They put them on the market for $400 million. Apparently nobody wanted to buy them because they're not in production now. It's hard to get parts. They're much more expensive to run than a 777, a 787, even a 757 or a 737. So they gave one apparently, reportedly, I can't confirm that, to Turkey, and the other one according to Senator Mullin, they were under discussions with the Biden administration of gifting one to the United States because the Boeing replacements for the two Air Force Ones never were reified. They never finished the contract. They're still in production. Trump maybe miffed them because he wanted a good deal. He got a good deal. Should have been done during the Biden administration. It wasn't. Now they're talking about maybe 3-4 more years to take a 747 and, make it have an ability to refuel, have security defenses on it, have all sorts of super sophisticated technology communications, maybe another $1 billion. In the meantime, Qatar saw all of this and they said, well, we'll give you this. And then nobody said much, I guess, during the Biden administration. It was secret. When Trump went over there and they offered it to him, he thought it would, because he was getting all of his foreign investment, it was kind of, okay, we'll take it. We'll give it to the Air Force, and maybe we'll have to retrofit it, but maybe, just maybe, it will come online before the 2 Boeings. I don't think it will, because you'll probably need another 500 million to $1 billion to make it, give it an ability to refuel, to give it air defenses, to give it security, to give it all sorts of things. And the way it's outfitted, it might not be the best ensemble, living room, bedroom, etc., for what the president needs with a huge staff. So that everybody got angry, especially when it was disclosed that it would go to the Trump Foundation after he left office. And Trump people said, well, it went to the Reagan. They have the original 747 that Reagan used. After a couple of administrations, it went to the Reagan Library, but it was defunct. It was immobile. It was a museum piece. So what Trump got in trouble for was saying that it wouldn't necessarily be stationary as a monument or a museum piece for the foundation, that it might be used by the foundation. They said, oh, it's the emolument clause. But let's be realistic in closing this little psychodrama. Think about it. It's a 747 that's already 12 years old. It'll have to be all retrofitted. Trump has his own 757. Do you really believe that the Trump Foundation Library will take this huge plane with all these accoutrements in it, that it doesn't need security, rockets, refueling, and is going to fly around the country with it or overseas when it's probably twice as expensive to operate, with additional pilots, with hard-to-get parts, with maintenance all over? Each person, every time they fly somewhere, they have to have a 747 mechanic on domestic airports. Come on. So the likelihood is that this plane will, if it is received, it will be parked at the Trump Foundation Library Museum, and it will be analogous to the Reagan. So what was the problem? The problem was there was not enough information that Biden had been in discussion, that it was a stopgap effort, that Qatar has given a lot of gifts to the U.S. It gave us $1 billion base and $1 billion retrofit on that base, and that's how they do business. And Donald Trump should have said, or could have said, or might have said, it will go to the foundation, but in all practical purposes, it will not be economically viable or feasible for us to use it, but it will be a good place for people to come into the plane, see it in the museum capacity.
Victor, you mentioned someone, and that's Senator Markwayne Mullin from Oklahoma, who I came to attention, I think, most prominently last year. I think he's the guy that wanted to get into a fight with the acting head of the Secret Service, I think, after the...
I think they kind of threatened. I think, didn't Bernie Sanders try to play the peacemaker?
I think so, yeah.
I think he's actually fought 2 or 3 mixed martial art fights and won them.
Yeah,
he has 6 children and self-employed entrepreneur with a private business. Very outspoken, very capable guy, and he's been a regular now on the evening Fox News shows.
I'm springing this on you, but talking about airplane. First of all, Victor, that this issue of having a fit, ready, up-to-date plane for the leader of the free world is something we're not going to see until 2030, when it should have been ready in 2020. I wonder, is this a function of Boeing being such a screwy joint, or just a federal government?
I'm a little worried about it. You remember, they've had all of these labor problems. They moved partially from Seattle to South Carolina.
Well, they went to Chicago between.
And then they had the door fly off, remember, on the Alaskan airline. And they've had rumors from employees that they've had DEI problems, that people were promoted not on meritocratic criteria. Now we hear that Trump has cut a 210 plane deal It looks like mostly 737 Maxes or 777, 787. All of these planes, but can Boeing, with its bad record on the space capsule, remember that Elon Musk had to bail them out. I don't know what's going on with that company, but it's been losing billions of dollars. And, this is the B-17, the B-29. It's a iconic American brand, and they've got to get their act together. I just think that we're going to look back at that period of the George Floyd riots from 2020, May, June, July, and August, through that crazy Biden election when he campaigned from the basement, and then the epidemic of BLM, Antifa activity, and especially the DEI that warped everything. And for 5 years, this country went collectively mad. And I went mad in every aspect of that word. Whether it was the Ivy League or Stanford or Yale competing with each other to drop the SAT, or comparative assessments of GPA, or letting in people on the basis of their race contrary to statute and law, you name it. We went completely crazy. And then the iconic moment really was that pathetic scene where Mark Milley and Lloyd Austin and the head of naval operations all tried to outdo each other by recommending Professor Kendi's work on reading lists required for the military. And they talked about white supremacy, white privilege, and white rage, and they were going to root it out. And yes, they did. They conducted a study, and they found no such thing, without any apologies to the 40 or 50,000 people who did not join the military, and from that particular, and mostly that was from that particular demographic, all of whom have now, I mean, if you look at, the one thing about Google and all of these search engines is they're very insidious. And we all know that if I Google January 6th riots, I'm going to, if I say riot, May, George Floyd riots, you know what's going to come up, Jack? January 6th riots. The problem with all of this stuff is that if you Google things like DI or non-meritocratic, you'll get the opposite results. But nevertheless, there's something about that period where this country went crazy and destroyed merit and violated the Supreme Court, and the universities are going to pay for it. That's a whole nother topic we've talked about.
Well, we'll talk some more about that. And also, I'd like to talk a little later, or maybe we'll do in the next show. You just mentioned it's the 5th year. I don't want to call it an anniversary, but 5 years ago, roughly, the George Floyd died and the riots that took place. And the New York Post today on this, again, it's May 17th, did a story on what is Minneapolis like 5 years later. And it's still a hellhole. It's very, very
they destroyed the universities, they destroyed the downtowns, they destroyed racial relations, the left did all of this. They destroyed the whole confidence in the quarantine when those so-called public health workers who have been haranguing us about you had to wear a mask, the so-called proverbial Karens of the world just went out and said, you know what? Your mental health's more important, so you got to go out there and demonstrate on behalf of the people, and we're not going to wear any masks. We're going to violate everything we said you had to do, and that was the end of their credibility. And Fauci's and everybody else's.
There was a 20,000 person rally in Brooklyn in the midst of all that. They were wearing masks, some of them were not, but if you went to a wedding with 20 people, if you could even get the wedding, you might be arrested depending on the town you're in.
You remember Nancy Pelosi and Schumer and everything bowing in the rotunda with their George Floyd banners around their neck? Yeah. That was a bathhouse. Everybody went nuts, and we haven't recovered from it yet. And part of it was the hatred of Donald Trump. Part of it was Officer Chauvin's expression on his face when he had the knee, and nobody wanted to see or hear anything about anything else. The chief of police, who has a book out, he was opportunistic. He sort of blamed his own officers when that type of technique had been institutionalized in his department, which came out in the trial but was ignored. So the whole thing and it created a whole DEI apparat that is now furious that people have woken out of their Rip Van Winkle slumber, and they're saying, my God, what did we do to the country? We destroyed 50 years of racial harmony. We went into sort of a segregationist, separatist, racial tribalism, chauvinist, and we got to stop this. You can't do this and run a country. And now then this inaugurated the permissibility of being overtly a white racist. So you could be, Jasmine Crockett. Oh, those are white boys. They're going to get a white boy, and you could be Ilhan Omar. These white men are terrorists. These white men are terrorists, and you could just say that with abandon, without any consequences, in purely racial terms.
Yeah.
And
if you didn't have a sign in front of your house or the correct avatar on your social media, you were racist also.
Most of those at the Stanford
right?
campus, they just took this. I just noticed when I would ride my bike, they took this house doesn't tolerate racism, with George Floyd fist or something. That was replaced by the Ukrainian flag.
Hey, Victor, did you and Sammy, I'm late to listening to everything, did you happen to talk about Comey and the seashells in the sand?
No, we did not. I have mixed views of that because I grew up in Southwest Fresno County, and I knew that term when I was in 8th grade, and everybody used it. And it wasn't the current one that the mafia has adopted. If you said 86, it was a bar turn. You were too rowdy and you got 86. So we would go to high school and at a dance, and the principal would come over to a bunch of kids that snuck in a little bit of, I don't know, Southern Comfort, and they were sipping it. And he would say, I'm going to 86 you kids. And we all thought because I'm an old fogey, I didn't realize that if you look up in the dictionary, that evolutionary word now connotates hit, take out, kill. It really does. And the original restaurant-bar term is like the third meaning given. But here's my point. He says he was walking on the beach and he sees this, 8647. He takes a picture and then he sends it off, and then there's a horrific backlash that he is, I think Don Jr. said, did he just threaten to kill my father? Something like that. But why didn't somebody just go, well, if you didn't do it, why don't you just show us where it is? Maybe it's still there. Maybe your fingerprints are on the shells. And why did you? And he said, this may have been political. It was deliberately political. That was why you did it. You did it. And he has a novel coming out about a right-wing person who threatens people and somebody gets killed. So he's getting all this free publicity from it. And that was probably the point to begin with, to get controversy for his novel. And he's the director of the FBI, so he knows every term backwards and forwards, every M13, every mafioso term. So he knows that 86 in the modern sense now can also mean to kill somebody. And here he is, the former director of the FBI. And then I just thought, as I saw that, Jack, I just said, rather than what did James Comey do, I posed the question to myself as I was walking among my picturesque ancestral pond and counting the number of dryers, washers, freezers, garbage bags, condoms, syringes, etc. All of the treatise of open borders. But anyway, what did James Comey not do? What did he not do? Did he lie to the President of the United States? Yes, he told Donald Trump he was not the object of an investigation. Did he leak classified information? Probably so. He took a confidential talk with the President of the United States, recorded it on an FBI device, used a third-party friend, and leaked it to the New York Times. Did he lie before Congress? Yes. Under oath, he went 245 times before the House Intelligence Committee, and he did what? I don't remember. I can't comment on that. 245 times while under oath. He did that. Did he try to ambush and destroy the National Security Advisor of the United States? Yes. He boasted that he sent his lawyers in and couldn't believe that Michael Flynn was open, honest, and naive enough not to have counsel. And they deposed him. And Michael Flynn had no way, no how was he colluding with the Russians, and they destroyed him. Did he was he the first person to pay Christopher Steele? Yes. As director of the FBI, they paid Christopher Steele as a contractor to disseminate that garbage dossier that was made up. In 2000, you can argue that in 2016, he affected one way or the other the outcome of the election because he is an investigator. He is an FBI director. He is not a prosecuting attorney. But Loretta Lynch did not want to be in the limelight because she had met Bill Clinton on the tarmac and the fix was in. So she abrogated her duties and gave James Comey de facto prosecutorial power as well as investigatory power. So here he was investigating whether Hillary Clinton had transmitted classified information on a homebrewed server, yes, and then did things that were subpoenaed from her end up destroyed or missing, yes. And he said that she was culpable for that, end of story, as an investigator, and then he did something that he has no right to do as a prosecutor, which he was not. He said, but I don't think any jury would convict her of this and we're not going to indict her. That's not your decision to make. That was the Attorney General of the United States, who was compromised ethically because she'd been caught with a secret meeting with Hillary Clinton's husband on the tarmac. I could go on, but let me just put it this way. As he was tweeting out this ridiculous 8647, Kash Patel, good friend of the show, announced that he was going to shut down the J. Edgar Hoover building in Washington. And not just because he wanted to distribute the FBI more evenly where crimes are taking place rather than to have a third of them in Washington, which is now the case. And I think there's 1,500 of the apparat in that building. But the building, I guess it's only 50 years old, but it's decrepit. It's not safe. And that decision was not made by Kash. It was made by his predecessor, Christopher Wray, to build a new building. But he took that as an opportunity to immediately transfer 1,500 agents out of Washington, which was a good thing. But that building, if you think about it, Jack, marks a sorry chapter in the history of a once great agency. If you go for that period, 25 years between Robert Mueller, James Comey, Andrew McCabe, and Christopher Wray, all out of that one office, it's pretty pathetic. Robert Mueller had that special counsel investigation, $40 million, 20 months, no Russian collusion, no Trump collusion. All of the lawyers were leftists. They had wiped clean. Andrew Weissman wiped clean his cell phone, said it was an accident. They destroyed evidence. They were bragged about by the left-wing media. Remember, they're the Dream Team, the All-Stars, the Hunter-Killer Team, the Army. They all had conflict of interest, either defending or working for Clinton and Obama aides in the past. And Robert Mueller was brought up before the same committee as James Comey, and they asked him two questions at one point. Would you comment on the Steele dossier? Oh my God, nothing about it. Would you comment on Glenn Simpson's and Fusion GPS? Yeah, I don't know nothing about it. Those were the two catalysts that prompted his appointment. So he essentially was either senile or he lied. Then we've already dealt with his successor, James Comey. Then the third guy to take over, the interim director, Andrew McCabe, he's the one referenced with Peter Strzok and Lisa Page as the one who had an insurance policy. Remember that Trump should not be elected? Then he lied on 4 occasions, according to the IG, 3 of them under oath, about whether he had leaked or not classified information of an investigation. He was fired for that. And then we go to his successor, Christopher Wray. He was the one that, I think he went after what? Radical traditionalist Catholics with that memo.
Yes.
I think that was radical traditionalist or traditionalist radical Catholics. He went after school board. He was the one that told the Senate, I got to go. I got an appointment. He got on his Gulfstream and flew to his vacation home. He was the one that okayed the Mar-a-Lago performance art raid. Remember that? They said that there's just a trove of classified documents that Donald Trump's singularly, and no one else has ever done this, and they're just CNN, MSNBC, they're just dozens, hundreds of these. They go in there and they cart off 13,000 documents and they find 102 classified papers, 0.007 of the trove. They go through Melania's underwear drawer. They scatter dossiers on the ground, which they weren't when they got there, take pictures as if Trump had thrown them on the ground. Then they bring little stickers they were prepared to put classified next to them, kind of a setup, photo op. He did that. And then under Christopher Wray, we had the FBI under legal counsel James Baker. Remember that, Jack? They were working with Twitter and Facebook, the FBI, to suppress Miranda Devine's stories about the authenticity of the Hunter laptop that was crucial in the last days of the 2020 campaign. The FBI had got a hold of that laptop, and they had authenticated it. They did that by forensics. They did that by checking the people who had communicated to Hunter on that laptop, and they had copies of the same communications found on that laptop. And they knew it was authentic, and their fellow intelligence people, the so-called 51 intelligence authorities that Anthony Blinken and Mike Morrell rounded up, they lied to the American people and said it had all the hallmarks of Russian information, which meant disinformation, and they did it right before the last debate so Joe Biden could get up in front of the country and lie his head off and said, how dare you, Donald Trump? 51 intelligence authorities have certified that this laptop is a Russian, and it really made a difference in the election. That is the FBI that was out of that office in Washington. So I'm glad they're going to blow it up, because that office did more damage to the reputation of a once great agency than anything. And all four of those successive directors in some way are culpable. And I haven't even got into Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and all of the smelly people at Walmart and Trump this and Trump that, or the brightest and brilliant Kevin Kleinsmith, the up-and-coming new lawyer who tried to destroy Carter Page by falsifying his email and document before a FISA court, indicted and convicted of a felony. Of course, he's one of the old buddy establishments, so he got a slap on the wrist. He's back as a lawyer. Compare that to the guys walking around the rotunda that spent, 5 months in solitary confinement and more?
Yeah. Well, Victor...
Kash Patel is really doing some great things, and to get rid of break up that Washington incestuous political elite in the FBI would be a wonderful.
I have something about that I want to say, and I will do that.
Can hardly wait.
I know you can. When we come back from these important messages. Something historic is happening to the U.S. dollar that could threaten your retirement and savings. The dollar index just suffered its biggest drop since the COVID crash, breaking away from Treasury yields. A signal currency experts are calling a structural breakdown. This isn't normal market noise. History shows that when nations hit massive debt, persistent trade deficits, and begin manipulating their currency, a major devaluation usually follows. Gold isn't expensive at $3,300 an ounce. It's the dollar that's rapidly losing value. Meanwhile, central banks are stockpiling gold at the fastest pace in 55 years. This isn't just inflation. It could be the early stages of a currency crisis. That's why American Alternative Assets created the Wealth Protection Guide that shows you exactly how to shield your retirement savings from dollar collapse, and do it while maintaining your purchasing power through physical gold. Call 833-2-USA-GOLD or visit VictorLovesGold.com today. That's 833-287-2465 or VictorLovesGold.com. Protect your wealth before it's too late. We are back with the Victor Davis Hanson Show, recording on Saturday the 17th, and this episode will be up on Tuesday, May 20th. And the thing I wanted to say, Victor, was you, Victor, have been talking for at least 3 years about that very idea of breaking up.
I have located to Kansas City.
Yeah, yes. So I was just paying you homage for your instigating.
I don't know if they're going to make the headquarters there or not. They were going to make it in Virginia, but I think they're going to disperse FBI agents to where crimes are committed. I know that Washington is a dangerous city, but you don't need 15,000 or 12,000 FBI agents in Washington.
Any Democrat-run city is...
They just intermarry with media people, with permanent bureaucrats, with politicians, and they finagle and intrigue and whatever the existing power is, usually on the left, and they make the necessary adjustments. And they've done this country great harm. And they're all sanctimonious. They're all sanctimonious. They get on there, when you see Andrew McCabe, when I see Andrew McCabe start pontificating on TV, I say, you lied. You lied under oath. When I see James Comey pontificate, I think, wow, you lied to the President of the United States. You lied under oath to the House Intelligence Committee by claiming the amnesia. And when I see Robert Mueller around, you rarely do, and I thought, wow, you must have lied. You knew what Fusion GPS was, or you had no business being the head general counsel. And Christopher Wray, why were you going after, abortion protesters, parents at school board meetings, Catholics, what was the whole point of that spectacular raid on Mar-a-Lago? At the same time, Joe Biden had taken classified materials for 30 years in 3 different to 4 different locations that were much less secure. And he only came forward not because what you people said. He had a sense of duty. He did it because he's appointed a special counsel to go after and torment Trump, and he was embarrassed people might find out that he'd done the same thing. So his lawyers panicked and said, hey, Joe, remember all those classified documents you've had in 30 places, 30 years in all these places, including Hunter's garage? We've got to manufacture something. We've got to go act like you're Dudley Do-Right, and you're going to go confess to this special counsel. It came to my attention, I had no idea, that I might have some classified files. Yeah, you did. And then, of course, he was off the hook because he was an old man with a poor memory.
Yeah. Hey, Victor, I apologize, by the way. I'm having a little bit of internet issues here, so I'm sorry if things are choppy or whatever. I just wonder, if somebody had put, not in seashells, but just spray painted 8646 outside the Capitol on...
he'd be in jail.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No
what would be a bigger crime is 44, Obama. Do you remember, I think it was in Missouri, this is off the top of my head, and people listening who have a better collective memory than I do will correct me, but there was a rodeo clown.
Oh,
and
sure.
He had been there the whole time, and all he did was put an Obama mask in. He didn't even make fun of Obama. But they not only fired him, they barred him from life, I think, from the state fair. They were so sensitive that you couldn't say a thing about Obama. If anybody did that, if they had 86-44, they'd be in jail. They really would.
After all, he was the one we have been waiting for, right?
He's the one that we've been waiting for.
Yeah.
Yes, we're just a few days away from fundamentally transforming the nation.
I have one more thing to ask you about Comey. So, Victor, before we move on to other subjects, as you were talking, I do think James Comey comes off to me as maybe the possessor, outside of Obama, I'm not sure who else, the most hubris of anyone in the last few years in Washington. I think he's in the top 3.
Yeah, there's something about that legal investigatory nexus in Washington that creates these people. Patrick Fitzgerald, remember him? The special counsel that went after Conrad Black.
I've known Patrick for 50 years.
So Scooter Libby,
yeah.
Self-righteousness. And Comey is another one. And they have hubris. They have hubris, but they don't believe in nemesis. But nemesis always gets them in the end because of their arrogance and their haughtiness. And they both have kind of been discredited, but especially Comey. Now he's got this 3rd novel coming out. And what is a grown man who once led the most powerful investigatory agency in the history of the world, what is he doing taking pictures of seashells that he's obviously arranged himself? I mean, I've walked thousands of beaches, and I don't think I've ever seen a political message. Most of the people go to the gym, the people who go to the beach are not interested as you are in contemporary politics.
Right.
If you get Johnny from the Jesse Waters show and you go down any street in America and you ask, what number does 47 represent? No one is going to say Trump. You did that, and you did it, and you did it because you thought it was cute, and it wasn't very cute for intrinsically because it's threatening the life of someone or at least violence to them, but it's especially egregious in two ways. You're the former director of the FBI, and you always will be, so you should have some modicum of decency, number one. And Donald Trump, two people tried to kill him, came close, so you shouldn't joke about that. And the idea that you're writing a novel about a right-wing guy named Buchanan who sounds off about threatening people, then somebody goes out and kills a liberal icon, and it's just too coincidental for this not to be a promotional stunt.
I'm not a Comey follower on social media, but nor is my wife. But my wife told me she either heard or read that he has had other beach political seashell messages, something about elect
Yeah, I think
Kamala
people
or something.
noted that everything he said was not true. But why would you believe him anyway when he went before the House Intelligence Committee and claimed that he had amnesia 245 times? I'm not at liberty to discuss that. I can't remember. I don't recall. And that was, that is so disgusting in Washington that Robert Mueller would say, I don't know anything about the Steele dossier, or same thing with Andrew McCabe. All of them, they all protect each other too. You have all those people from the Midwest, and a lot of them meant well, and they went to the Capitol, they got caught up in something, but the vast majority were not violent. They didn't break any laws. They shouldn't have walked into the rotunda, those who did, because it was closed, but they were welcomed in. They walked around. And what did the FBI do for the next year? They used facial recognition, and they got every single one of them. And they never told us how many informants were there, although we had a New York Times Pulitzer Prize winning journalist who said they were everywhere, FBI informants, and the whole thing was a joke. He was caught on Operation Veritas at the time. So it's something else. It's a toxic place, and the more you can get the bureaucracies out of Washington, the better.
Amen.
I hope it's relocated to Oklahoma City or Little Rock, Arkansas, somewhere in the middle of the state where there's normal people.
Yeah. Great city, too. I like Oklahoma
Middle of the
City.
nation.
Yeah. Hey, Victor, let's get your thoughts on Robert Hur. I think he was right when he said, I really can't bring this guy before a jury. I saw the video, heard the audio, I should say. I'm sure you did also. And I felt bad for the
Absolutely.
guy.
Two people who come off just despicable are Kamala Harris when Robert Hur issued his report. Remember how she grandstanded and said, "This is terrible. He had no business. You should apologize, Kamala, because anybody who listens to that tape knows you're lying and knows that you knew you were lying when you said it, and you disparaged the special prosecutor. He was right. You were wrong. Apologize." And then Joe Biden has a special apology because he was asked about Robert Hur's conclusions, and he said, "Is it true that you did not remember the date of your son's death?" How dare he mention the son? That's none of his damn business. No, he didn't mention it, Joe. You did. You brought up, Bo. You did. You were the one that brought him up. You were the one that said that his death affected you. You were using his death in the same manner you use the death of your wife. For political advantage. In this case, you were trying to say that you took out classified documents and you didn't remember the dates because you were in mourning, and you brought up the date of your son's death, which was wrong. And you were politely remonstrated and corrected. Then you turned that around in front of the nation and damned Robert Hur for bringing it up, which he didn't do. And you said he had none of your business. You were the one. Both of them owe an apology to him. That being said, when Robert Hur said that these were actionable offenses, there was clear evidence. I'm not all in agreement with Robert Hur for two reasons. The ghostwriter who was taping some of the conversations, some of which alluded to classified document contents, which he had, which is a felony. So you had somebody without a security clearance being given classified information by Joe Biden, and that tape was subpoenaed, and he erased it. And he said, does anybody really believe he erased it because he was a good citizen worried about hacking, or was he worried about going to jail? And Robert Hur knew that. And Robert Hur should have charged him, because they charge other people for destroying subpoenaed evidence. And they didn't. And the second thing is, with all due respect to Robert Hur, if you're a special counsel and you find felonious culpability, I know that prosecutors and federal attorneys all the time have to, in a cost-benefit analysis, try to think, is it worth going to trial? What are our chances? But it's really not your decision to outguess the jury. You don't really know how they're going to react to Joe Biden. And you put him on the stand. They might have just the opposite effect that half the nation did when they saw him lying and grasping for words. So if you really believe that he broke the law, and you said he did, then don't worry about whether they would be sympathetic or not. Put him on the stand. Put him on the stand. And the reason you didn't put him on the stand was you were getting enormous political pressure that this was a big setup, because the only reason that you were appointed, and the only reason that Joe Biden came forward after 30 years and admitted that he had taken out classified documents, is that earlier he had just appointed Jack Smith to go after Donald Trump, and it was untenable that you would indict a president for something that you were going after Donald Trump for. You had to prove that Donald Trump alone was culpable and that Biden was not culpable, when in fact, in many ways, Biden was more culpable. He took the documents for a longer period of time, less secure locations, and his speechwriter destroyed subpoenaed evidence.
Well, I think, Victor, if America had heard the audio of that prior to the election, prior to Biden withdrawing from running, there would have been a supermajority of shock, saying, like, how is this man with such mental decrepitude the leader of the free world?
I don't understand. Jake Tapper has this book coming out with his Axios co-author, in which he's blasting the media for participating in a cover-up that endangered the nation by having a waxen effigy as president. But I think now there's 11 clips of him assuring the nation that Joe Biden was fine, and criticizing severely people like Laura Trump, who suggested otherwise.
Bringing up the stutter attack, where I'd like to think I've been around, and I have. I never knew there was a stutter issue with Joe Biden, that all of a sudden this was a tripwire.
There was a mind freeze problem. And, you know what it was, because he couldn't speak because he was cognitively challenged, so they said a stutter. And then she was talking about cognitive disability, and they said, no, you're talking about a stutter. And, it's had nothing to do with that. She was not trying to talk about a stutter. She was trying to say that he was incapable of finishing a sentence. And they tried to take the moral high ground. Those people are disgusting. They really are, the media.
Speaking of disgusting people, Victor, before we go to the break, get your thoughts on one last. We'll join two headlines. One is that Wisconsin judge, Hannah Dugan, who let the foreign criminal, illegal alien, head out try to get him out the side door. She has been charged by a federal grand jury. And so it looks like she's going to come up, be formally charged for what she did. She's set up a defense fund. I'm sure that'll be flush with leftist money. And then also, we talked about it on our last episode, Representative LaMonica McIver, the great body slamming congresswoman from New Jersey. Here's a headline: McIver set to be charged over the Delaney Hall incident. That Delaney Hall is where ICE has kept these dirt bags. This is from the New Jersey Globe. The Justice Department plans to bring charges against Rep. LaMonica McIver following a scuffle with federal immigration agents last week. 3 sources speaking on a condition of anonymity confirmed to the Globe, et cetera, et cetera. So, dynamics may change between the time we are talking now and the time this podcast is up. But any thoughts on justice coming to these two wonderful ladies?
It's just a clear-cut case. They either broke They either committed a felony or they didn't. And unfortunately for the representative, it's on tape that she struck an officer. And on clearly from the judge, it's on tape that she postponed a trial in progress and then helped escort a defendant who was, by the way, accused of plummeting three people and assaulting, including a woman and he was an illegal alien, and then tried to put him through a normally unused door as an escape route without any care at all of the difficulty she was placing on federal authorities, or that she was aiding and abetting a felon to escape. And so if you have a law, then they're guilty. If they don't have a law, they're not. But more importantly, why do they do these things? And the answer is they think that because they're left and they are moral and they're worried about equity and equality of result and the poor and they discriminate, then they have a God-given right to use any means necessary to achieve their moral ends. So they mock the law because they think, you know what? These are for stupid people, not us. We're powerful, elite. We went to the right schools. We have the right ideology. We can do whatever we want. And that's been the formula of the left for the last 1,000 years. That's why they're very dangerous people, because they always say that when they do terrible things, they do it for the people, and they care about the people, and they're worried about the people. Sometimes they use the word children. It's for the children. That's what Nancy Pelosi and
the one we don't,
Hillary Clinton said, the children.
Ones we don't abort.
And what's her name does? Michelle Obama, the children. She just said the other day the nuclear family was ossified, out of date, anachronistic. You need more people involved.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, like we need thruples, quadruples. Okay. Wow.
She has a podcast, and when she left office, she was the most widely, I don't know why, because she had such angry outburst during the 2016 campaign, and while she was really angry. And I know that she's going to say, well, you're just saying that because she's a proud black woman. No, I'm not. It was demonstrable, but she's doing all she can with her podcast. I've never heard it. All she can to convince people that she was not a nice person and had serious psychological problems of insecurity and envy and you name it.
Well, Victor, we're going to talk about Harvard, which is in the news, in the headlines, and in the crosshairs, and we'll do that when we come back from these final important messages.
Are you ready to move easily and independently without pain or stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a plumb, hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Discover Native Path Collagen. Made with only type 1 and 3 collagen fibers, the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen in your body, found in your cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, and gut. Type 1 and 3 provide maximum benefits without the need for unnecessary fillers. Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. Completely flavorless, Native Path Collagen can be added to anything. Coffee, smoothies, oatmeal, you name it. Its peptide formula makes it more bioavailable, meaning it's absorbed more easily and mixes perfectly without clumping. And you can get 3 or 6 packs at a fraction of the price of other brands. Visit getnativepath.com/Victor and start your transformation today. That is getnativepath.com/VICTOR. I personally love the PM Collagen formula with melatonin. It's given me many nights of great sleep, and the electrolyte drink mix for my water at workouts. They are my friends, and I'm sure they will be yours.
We are back with the Victor Davis Hanson Show. So, Victor, a couple of things. Let's start off with these are two X posts, and one is from Bill Ackman. He writes, I've reached out Bill Ackman is the billionaire who was very much involved in the post-October 7th pushback against the elite schools and cutting off their funding. I've reached out to members of the Harvard Corporation board offering to help, but I've received no response. I did the same shortly after October 7th. My offers to help were rejected. At least back then I got a response. Chair Penny Pritzker and the entire Harvard Corporation board need to resign. They're presiding over the destruction of this once great institution. At this point, only new leadership can fix this mess. So what's the mess? This is the federal government going after them for discrimination in hiring. I know Chris Rufo has reported a lot about that. And I saw another X post, I was going to say tweet, where the board members, several board members are like they are in deep fear. They believe now they are in an untenable position, given the evidence that was out there. It was Harvard had it on websites that took everything down. But like, here are the hiring criteria. White men need not apply, essentially.
Oh, they had everywhere. The worst was the Harvard Law School, Harvard Review. You couldn't be on there if you were white. They gave a prize of $65,000 to the Harvard law student who had been tried and would have been convicted, but they made a plea bargain, who assaulted a Jewish student. He was rewarded for that. That is a fight. I said that a lot of times earlier, that the more, unfortunately, I've been in a university, as some of my friends and family have mocked me, and I think with good cause, since I was 18. So 53, 54 years, and I've seen it backwards and forwards. I've been at state colleges, I've been at private colleges, I've been at so-called non-prestigious, prestigious, I've been at, you name it. And I come away with the following diagnosis. These universities will be stupid if they try to fight this, because they have so much exposure, so much culpability, that they don't want the public to know. I'm not saying they don't do a good thing. Harvard University Press created the whole Loeb Classical Library. Every classical author in Latin and Greek has a translation. It was a wonderful thing. They helped invent weaponry that helped win World War II. I have friends at Harvard. Carlos Camingo is a good friend. He's a doctor. He's made strides with vitamin D and asthma. So they do wonderful things, but this is going to be therapeutic and corrective if they'll just say, okay, we understand what we've done, and we're going to make the reforms exactly at 90% of what you want. We can negotiate some stuff, but we've got to change. It's for our own good. They'll be fine. They'll have plenty of money. They'll do it, but they won't do it because they would rather fight and say that they fought the Orange Man than admit their culpability. And their culpability is just staggering. They have systematically and serially violated the 2022 Supreme Court ruling. They use race for admissions. They use it for promotion. They use it for recruitment. They use it for retention. They do it all the time. They have segregated dorm theme houses. I'm talking about all of them, not just Harvard. They do it for graduations. They know they're gouging the federal government when they charge 40 to 60% surcharges, skim off the top. They know that. They've known it for a long time. Everybody knew they did it. And they got away with it because they said they're Harvard or Stanford or Princeton, and how dare you suggest it? It's not going to path-breaking research, where a lot of 20% of it was going to DEI. They know that. They know that they have hired thousands of administrators they don't need. They know that I don't know what the word is. It's embedded in the universities. They are anti-Semitic. And everybody should understand why they're anti-Semitic. They're not anti-Semitic because suddenly they're reverting back to the old gentleman's agreement of the 1950s, where the white Brahmin class was suspicious of what they called pushy Jews that were, they were better prepared than many of them, and they didn't think that that your parents or your pedigree should matter, and Jews were outperforming them on tests. It's not that. It's two things that make them anti-Semitic. Number one, they have brought in thousands of students from the Middle East who despise Israeli and they despise Jews. And they have, under the shield of DEI, they have said that they are victims, even though most of the foreign students are the establishment and the elite of the Middle East that have the money to come over here. And they are systematically anti-Semitic, and the university knows that. And number two, when you look at the DEI industry, from the beginning, it's been anti-Semitic. Whether you say it's Al Sharpton, tell them Jews to come over here and I'm going to ready put their yarmulke on, or if it's Jesse Jackson, this is Jaime Town, or it's the gutter religion of Louis Farrakhan, you name it. There's been a long history of anti-Semitism in a lot of the minority communities, and they too have been shielded because of DEI and say, we are victims, we cannot be victimizers. And the university sees both of those groups as sacrosanct and exempt, and it will never, ever apply to any standard to them, because they also see Jews as white oppressors, wealthy colonizers, Israelis, etc. And they won't change. They will not change. You can issue all of the position papers, 900 pages at Stanford. You can document the anti-Semitism, and there's a double standard, and the universities know it. They know it backwards and forwards. And so they're culpable. And they're culpable on the race. They're culpable on the research grants. They're culpable on hiding foreign money, 30 to 50, 60 billion dollars from the Middle East and communist China. They're culpable. They know that 1 or 2% of the 300,000 students here from China are active spies for the People's Liberation Army. Stanford Review has a whole series on it. They know they're collecting information, and they do not, and they just say, you know what, that's racist. You're bringing up the old yellow peril. No, 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 no. You know what you're doing. They're gouging students. They get 110% of the full cost paid by the Chinese Communist government, and they just turn a blind eye to what goes on. They have all that culpability, all of it. They understand that biological men are competing in women's sports. They just ignore the executive orders. So what they should do is say, you know what? We're creepy. And the public knows that we have raised tuition much higher than the annual rate of inflation and gouged the public because of the student loan program, et cetera, and federal money. So we're going to try to reform for our own good. And yes, we will honor the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth. We will give due process to people who are accused of sexual prejudice or sexual harassment, or they said the N-word or something like that, or there was a noose on a dorm day. We'll give them full due process. And if the speaker comes on campus, we will enforce the First Amendment. We're not going to say anymore, this isn't who we are. We condemn this in the strongest term, then do nothing to people who disrupt and shout and attack speakers. So if they want to do it, they can get by. But this Garber guy at Harvard, he's just so self-righteous. He's in an echo chamber. He must read his email every day, Jack, and see his little emails from, oh my, today the president of Georgetown congratulate. Oh, the provost at Yale said, stick in there. You know what I mean? They don't get any feedback from real people. And they don't understand how exposed they are and the things they do that the public would just be they'd be abhorred by. They would just think is how do they get away with it?
And done with the public dollar, in a sense, because of the tax deduction status. Victor, as we head out the door here, and I do want to remind people to go to Victor's website, The Blade of Perseus, victorhanson.com. Victor writes exclusive pieces for that every week, 2 a week. It does an exclusive video. And to read them, to see it, you need to subscribe. It's $65 a year. Stick your toe in the water, $6.50 for a month. So give that a shot. Go to victorhanson.com. Victor, there's a talk, this whole concept of DEI for a lot of people, it's, this is a recent thing. And here's a headline from the Populist Times. It says, Gender and Sexuality Studies, librarian admits DEI is still alive at the University of Michigan. That's what it's masquerading now under Gender and Sexuality Studies. But Victor, as we have talked about, you have shared your wisdom and experience on, and you just said something about it now, the long tenure you've had in the university, your experience with DEI is something that predates the term DEI. And yes. People shouldn't be fooled that this is something relatively new.
No. What it is was the old affirmative action. And affirmative action, remember, started in 1964-5 as part of the civil rights movement and was designed exclusively to address systematic racism and Jim Crow toward African Americans, and was to give them a so-called leg up. And then it expanded to other self-described victimized groups, and those were mostly Hispanic and Native Americans. And then it was expanded to women. But you see, what's happening is the number of victimized is growing and the number of victimizers is shrinking. So when you have 12% African American, and now with a new demography, 12% Hispanic, you're 24, and then you add women in there, you're 50, now you're up to 75. And then under Obama, he wanted to make it a majority in terms strictly of race, so he took that old word diversity and he just made sure it didn't mean intellectual diversity, but racial diversity. And I can remember the day it happened, Jack. I had a friend who was a Punjabi, and up until that point, he had been complaining to me on campus that it wasn't fair, that he was very, very dark. In fact, he was darker than most of my African American students. And he said he was an object sometimes of racism, but that he, because he came from the Punjab and he wasn't a protected group, got no affirmative action. And then somewhere around the third year of the Obama administration, he came in and said, "Now I'm an Asian now." And there was a court litigation, but he felt that he was a minority now. And then all of a sudden, Arab American, so it was all redefined as non-white. It didn't matter your class. It didn't matter how wealthy you were. It didn't matter whether you had ever been victimized or on the end of prejudicial behavior or conduct. You were now a victim in this new Marxist binary. And that meant that 30% of the country by race, and probably 75% when you add women and greater, were victims. The problem was that they had never made the case that there was a systematic, endemic white racism throughout the United States in the post-civil rights era. There's always individual racism and collective, but systematic? So they started using words, adjectives like systemic or insidious, because they couldn't find it. So it's like air, it's everywhere. We can't see it, we can't smell it, but it must be there, so we'll call it systemic, or we'll call it. As soon as I saw those adjectives, you could see what was going on. And then you started to have to manufacture. So every time somebody found a noose remember the stock car driver who said he found a rope on,
Yeah.
and then
It's
Stanford
like
had
10
a couple.
FBI agents covered that, I think. Yeah.
I'd make a statement that I would make a guess that every major university's had at least 2 or 3 noose incidents and people writing the N-word on dorm doors, and I think 99% have never found the culpable person, other than the ones who were found out to be the victims had created those. And then we get into the Juicy Smollett and the Duke Lacrosse and the Covington kids, one psychodrama after another. And the net result of each time they did this, they thought they could get away with it, the DEI industry. And then finally, after the George Floyd riots and after all of the hysteria, I think the nation, 55% of the nation, including a lot of minorities, just shrugged their shoulders and said, "I don't care anymore. I'm sick of it. This is tribalism. This is racial chauvinism. This is prejudicial. We're sick of it." And it became tragic because I know a lot of very talented African-American and Hispanic people in positions of power, but they have been libeled as DEI appointees because of the abuses of the system. And it's kind of like in the old days, if you were a white guy and your dad owned the company and he had you start out to learn the business and you started out driving a truck and everybody make fun of you and say, "Oh, you just got the job because your dad is that kind of stuff." And why would you transfer that cosmically to the whole country? That kind of old boy network refashioned as race or gender. And it's tragic what happened. And I think everybody's just, in a multiracial society where 1/4 of most races intermarry with somebody of the opposite race, how can you need DNA badges to calibrate everybody's racial victimization card? So I just don't think it's ever going to work again. I think people are they are now, I shouldn't say going to, Right now, they think if we're a multiracial democracy, the only chance we have is one culture. Multiculturalism does not work.
Yeah.
We
E
only we have
pluribus
to.
unum.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Our race
Yeah.
has to be incidental, not essential to who we are. And if you and I, that's the way I go. Anytime I go somewhere and I hear somebody say, as a Latina, as a black, and I hear that a lot, I just tune out. I just do. I don't want to hear it anymore. I want to hear who they are. I want to hear what they say. I want to evaluate the caliber of their conversation or argument. I just don't want to have any self-identification. I did that recently. A person said as a black woman, and I said as a white man, and silence. But that's what people need to hear, because it's silly to say as a white man. Hey, as a white man, Jack, what does that mean? It
We're
means
playing
nothing.
the poker game, the intersectionality poker game, right? we're tired of it. Like,
I don't know who. I guess somebody has a chart somewhere in a vault in Washington, 5 miles below the surface, where there's the intersectional victimization chart, where they've got to, figure it out. Well, this guy gets this because he's got 2 points higher than that person. The gay, the kind of the proverbial gay black transgendered person is the victim
disabled.
par excellence.
If they're disabled, that outranks. Hey, Victor, we've come to the end of this. I apologize again for any glitches with. I got to get Starlink. I got to get Elon.
Yeah, you're
on the phone here.
suggesting that in the center of wealth and power in Connecticut, you have less reliable internet than out here in Fresno, Southwest Fresno County, among the impoverished.
It's quite possible, Victor. But maybe all those washing machines and dryers are acting as some sort
I don't know. Maybe so.
Power source. Hey, I do, as we do at the end of the show, and thanks. We have so many new listeners and viewers through YouTube and Rumble on the viewing side. Thank you. I hope you're enjoying Victor's wisdom. We have over 1,000 comments that come in every week. So we try to go through them. Here's one, Victor. It's from YouTube. And you and I were talking on a recent episode about your flying experiences. So this is from J.G. Bonney, a retired airline pilot here. We had a trip from LaGuardia, that's in New York, to West Palm Beach. My first time flying that route. The flight attendant, who was a regular, was referring to it as the Lord's flight. I asked her what she meant. She said, "We have 12 wheelchairs boarding, but by the time we get to Palm Beach, most or all of them will have been miraculously cured and walked themselves off the plane." End quote. She was right. We thank you, J.G. Bonney, for sharing your experience. I'll read one more quickly. This is kind of sweet in its way. It's from He Who Loves, W1D, writes, "Hey, Jack and Victor, I haven't been able to listen to you as much. I've been working for my mother in her yard. I'm listening to you now as I go to sleep. It's good to hear your voices. Good night. I'm sure it will be a good hour. Thank you."
You.
Yeah,
I wish I could sleep.
Yeah.
I'm listening to my nostril instead of a podcast.
Well,
You know what? Just to finish, to give a preview, in next week's Ultra, I have a 2-part series on why we hate to fly.
Oh, good.
And I go through all the things that aggravate us. I urge all of you to read. I would just end today by saying the poor pilot is right. The airlines could stop this very quickly by just saying, if you get on a wheelchair, you will board last, and you will board first, and you can have your choice carry-on space, but you will be the last to disembark. And if you have a connection, you should consider that. You might have an advantage getting on, but if you have a tight connection, you're not going to get up because you're disabled. And that would stop it. And the second thing would be, why don't they pay people? Why don't they let you check in luggage free and charge you for carry-on? And those things would board like crazy. You could just carry, a pouch or something, or a suitcase. A backpack, but the roller things, if you had to pay for those,
cellos,
flight,
banjos,
that flight would be bored. And then they should limit pets to dogs and get rid of the birds and the cats and the horses, the snakes and the frogs and the lizards.
You saw that someone did try to bring in a service ostrich once on a plane. So, hey, Victor, I wanted to let people know I write Civil Thoughts, the free weekly email newsletter from the Center for Civil Society. Go to thoughts.com. Sign up. It comes out every Friday, and it has 14 recommended readings, and I know people are liking it, and some are even loving it. Thanks for those who write to me to say that, but you'll enjoy it. Victor, you've been terrific, as usual. We will be back soon with another episode of the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching.